Is Red Bull cheating or sandbagging? Looks like cars aren't the only thing catching speed this season of F1. As Red Bull beats everyone in their way on their warpath to victory, rumours and allegations of sandbagging are flying through the air. Some people, particularly George Russell, say their victory isn't natural. So we're wondering, what exactly is the truth? Is Red Bull actually cheating? Start your engines as we race to catch the latest news and drama of the Formula One season. Before we get into it, please do us a favour and like and subscribe to our channel, F1 Racing Now. That way you'll be sure to be kept in the know of all the exciting things that unfold this season. Look, no one denies that Verstappen is one of the most talented people to ever put his foot on the pedal. His achievements and records speak for themselves after all. But Red Bull's 100% streak at the Australian Grand Prix seems a little far-fetched to some people. Even though Verstappen had started down in 15th, he still left the competition in the dust as they secured a 1-2 finish in Saudi Arabia, right after Red Bull washed out the competition in Bahrain. After Australia, the team had already built up a 58-point lead in the Constructors' Championship. The team with the second highest points is lagging behind with just half as much. And let's be real, winning all three opening rounds and landing two 1-2 finishes this season was bound to raise a few eyebrows and get a few complaints. People are left wondering, is Red Bull sandbagging? Are they downright cheating? We'll just have to examine the races a little more closely for that. First, let's go back to Saudi Arabia. When Verstappen overtook Mercedes back in the Middle East country, Lewis Hamilton described the RB19 as the fastest car he'd ever seen in F1. According to David Croft, the Sky F1 commentator, the difference between the two cars was like comparing an F1 to an F2 car. It's a pretty big claim to make, but as we'd learned in Australia, it wasn't entirely unfounded. RB19 seemed to be better than it was in qualifying. We'll have to go back to Melbourne for this one. Initially, the Dutch driver was back in the chasing pack. At first, it seemed like Lady Luck was playing her games, with this neck-and-neck competition broken up by Russell being uninterrupted by a red flag after pitting during a safety car period. But Hamilton was still ahead and Red Bull was down in the trenches. Of course, Verstappen wasn't going to let the competition race by. When DRS became available, the abilities were on full display and he overtook Hamilton at turn 9. Verstappen managed to turn a 0.5 second deficit into a lead of over 2 seconds. By the end of the race, the Dutch driver had managed to put a pretty hefty distance between himself and Hamilton, building up a 9-second lead. Even when a mistake caused him to go off track, it was basically no problem, and he rebuilt the second he lost instantly. Now, there's something we have to mention. Hamilton's performance wasn't perfect either. His sector times show he was a full second slower in the third sector in the laps before and after. People have come up with their own explanations of what's going on, and the loudest of these voices is George Russell. Mercedes chief Toto Wolff described this blatant display of straight-line speed advantage as mind-boggling, but as we've said before, he wasn't the one throwing the most stones. According to what he told the BBC's Checkered Flag podcast, Russell thinks that Red Bull is holding back and that 9-second lead was them being modest. Why? Well, he's also come up with some pretty interesting theories about that. Russell has said that they're either embarrassed to go full speed or worried that the sport would find out that they're not exactly going full throttle. In the event that Red Bull is hiding their true potential, the FIA will try to handicap the team somehow. Of course, Red Bull would be in their right mind to fear the rule changes. After 2020, when the Mercedes dominated the field, the rule changes of 2021, which brought reworked floor and diffuser regulations, they struggled against Red Bull in the opening half of the year. Then again, as we go further ahead in the season, the lack of wind tunnel testing will mean that the Milton Keynes squad will be falling further and further behind everyone else, so even if nothing happens, their head start might not last for very long. Russell also pointed out that they probably have a 7/10 advantage over the field, but he did admit that Mercedes will have to up their game if they hope to compete with the Red Bull at this point. Of course, his words seem to have rubbed some people up the wrong way. Verstappen for the most part kept his cool, but the large-scale outrage and speculation amongst the grid finally caused the man of the hour himself to step in. In an interview with the BBC, Verstappen debunked all of these claims. According to him, there's really nothing that the FIA can do against his team. He also offered a simple explanation as to why he seemed to be holding back in Melbourne. He just didn't want to wear out his tyres. It's a pretty good explanation, since no one knew how long the hard tyre could even last. His priorities were not exactly to push himself to gain half a second every lap at the risk of destroying them. And since it was a one-stop race very early in the season, there was bound to be some element of tyre management going on at least. Verstappen also said that if he did lose 1 or 2 spots in the opening lap, then it just wasn't the end of the world for him. Of course, while the racers seemed pretty chill about the whole ordeal, the management didn't feel the need to hold back in what they said. Red Bull's team principal Christian Horner also had a few choice words for Russell. He started by saying that Sergio Perez's run from the back to the 5th spot was more than evidence enough that Red Bull wasn't playing dirty to avoid a sudden rule change. He wouldn't have held back 7/10 of the lap just because he didn't want to show it. Now, Perez was at a disadvantage simply because he started so far back on the field, bearing in mind that this track is notoriously difficult to overtake on. On the other hand, he also seemed really uncomfortable in the RB19, so he might not have been driving to his full potential. Horner also pointed out that any advantage that Verstappen might have had was just made worse by Hamilton's error. And this is where he really went all out with the jabs he took at his opponents. According to Horner, regarding the cheating and sandbagging, George Russell should be more than aware of any possible cheating, considering the tactics his team has used in the past. If you didn't know, back in 2014 when the turbo hybrid engine era was just starting up, Mercedes ex-director Paddy Lowe underlined that the German marque opted to hide its significant engine advantage. Back then, Mercedes was winning races by over a minute, and as people have pointed out, they sure didn't feel the need to complain about sandbagging at that time. Basically, he called them out for having done the exact same thing that they were now accusing Red Bull of. So, where are we at now? After the Australian debacle, here are the scores. Red Bull stands at 123 points on the board after 3 races in the Constructors' Championship. They're dominating the competition like no other, making it all look like child's play. Aston Martin is in second, and the competition is nowhere near close. With just 65 points, they'd be hard-pressed to get over Red Bull's lead anytime soon. Mercedes doesn't fare much better, with 56 points to their name. With this context in mind, it's not exactly surprising that Russell made those comments. After all, if Red Bull is downplaying what they can do, then they should be penalised. On the other hand, Red Bull has not been shy about the modifications they've made to their car, and it's not exactly a secret that Adrian Newey, Red Bull's car designer, is one of the greatest men ever in the field. As Toto Wolff himself has said, if Red Bull has a car that quick on the straight, then it's due to their own ingenuity. The competition just has to put the pedal to the metal if they want to catch up. Considering Mercedes' disadvantage as they go further into the competition, that will probably be happening regardless. So, is Red Bull sandbagging? Well, we can't be certain about it, but something is definitely up. And if they are cheating, then they certainly have the balls the size of real bulls to think they can get away with it all. Who knows for sure? Maybe when the management has moved away from the team, we'll see a repeat of what happened with Mercedes in 2014. What's your opinion on this whole situation? Be sure to let us know in the comments. And if you like this video, do give us a subscribe and tap the bell icon so you don't miss out on any of the action. Stay subscribed for more exciting content. Until the next one, this has been F1 Racing Now, your inside track to all things F1.